because it is kind of the time of year for harvest and for winter prep and all that. So if anybody has some questions, I'm happy to deal with those as well. How many people are pretty new at this, a year or two? And how many people have been doing it for 2 to 5, 6 years? And how many people have been doing it longer than me? All right. And is there anybody in here who's thinking of raising queens on a commercial basis? Is anybody thinking of raising queens at all, or was this just Jeff's one?
This is my personal seminar.
Yeah, Jeff wanted to see. So you'd like to raise some queens?
Actually, maybe not next year, but year after.
Yeah, same.
Oh,
Sorry, let's do one at a time. Sorry, I see. Yes.
Done walkaway splits, if you can consider that a method.
That is definitely a method.
Last year, this past season,
Oh, turn that down.
Yep.
and I did the whole, the starter box, I always call it the one thing, cell builder.
Yep.
And then, I made what was probably a fatal error that I shut the box from the rest from it. I don't know, it was a long process, I was tired, and anyway.
Fine, we call
But
that
at least I
having a
went
short
through the
nap.
steps, and I'd like to try to avoid doing that, collecting the shaking and the nurse bees. I'd like to find a way around that.
Okay, we'll show you a way around that. And Dale, you tried this?
no,
But you're interested.
I'm interested. This is my
Yep.
first year. I was just eager to try that.
Sounds good.
I'm interested too, but
Right.
not for this next year.
And so the rest of you are just along for the ride? Okay. Well, one of the things, so we can keep the queen rearing part fairly short. We can cruise through queen rearing, and if you want to talk about something else, we can do that. If Jeff's okay with that. We can get in depth into queen rearing as we'd like to. And we can also spend more time kind of at the beginning of the talk on a smaller scale versions of queen rearing, which would be more appropriate to people who have fewer than 50 colonies. So without further ado, go ahead.
Can you raise it? That's too high. Oh, yeah, another book.
Another book.
Oh, yeah, it's quite. Dim lights. Oh.
Put it under the foot instead of under the whole thing.
Much better.
That's better.
Okay, now no sleeping while the lights are out. So breeder selection, we'll cruise through this. This is relevant to you guys because a lot of the methods, small scale methods, involve using the colony that you like to rear the queens, which would mean it would become your breeder queen as well as your cell builder. So let's talk briefly. This is a very handsome queen. We like to see queens that look like that. So that would be one attribute we look for. Go ahead. This is actually our chart. My daughter is much better with computers than I am, so she put this chart together for us. And we spend, once we've finished kind of most of the supering and setting up all the comb honey colonies, it's early July. And we go through every single colony and we evaluate it on all these characteristics on a scale of 1 to 5. We're looking at the queen, we're looking at productivity, we're looking at the brood pattern, we're looking at how runny they are, we're looking at how much they stitch your socks to your ankles. Later we keep track of honey production, mite levels, anything that's relevant to what you want. And so if you've got a colony that you really like, that's essentially what we're trying to keep track of. If you've just got 2 to 5 to 10 colonies, you might be able to keep these notes in pencil on the side of the hut. That's what we used to do. Sharpie wears off. Crayon is hard to get rid of, but pencil's great. It stays for years, and you can erase it with an artist's eraser when you're done with it, or when you switch the boxes to a different colony. And then all your notes are right there, and you can go out and look at them. Go ahead, Jeff. Once you've decided kind of who you want to breed from, here's what you're going to need to actually go ahead and graft. The most important piece of equipment is your calendar. You're going to need a colony as a breeder and a colony as a cell builder. You're going to need several queen excluders. Your life is going to be much easier if you have more than one. And for this, you can get the cheap plastic ones. I really don't like them for much of anything except for this, but they're fine for queen rearing. If you're going to graft, you're also then going to need the queen cups, you're going to need the frame that they go in, and you're going to need a quill. You can use an actual feather that you found, but I'd recommend if you're going to try grafting, get a Chinese grafting tool. They're like $2.35, and it's the easiest type to learn how to use, and in most cases, they do the best job. Go ahead. Here's your calendar. We'll look at it as a 2-week cycle. An egg is an egg for 3 days. So if the queen lays the eggs on a Sunday, the eggs are going to hatch on a Tuesday. And you want an egg that's roughly a day old. It can be up to 2 days old, but closer to 24 hours is better. And that's the larva that you're going to graft. Queen cell is fed for 5 days, give or take, and so that cell is open and fed for 5 days in the cell builder or in the starter box or in the swarm box, however you decided to do it, and on day 5 they're sealed. And the cells are pretty fragile until day 11, when they're mostly developed but the wings haven't fully developed yet. And if you catch them right in that window in the purple-eye stage, when they're mostly developed but the wings are not developing, you can move those cells. And so day 11, if grafting is day 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's the day that you want to move your cells around. And this will all make more sense when we talk about it. Go ahead. And we'll look at that again. Go ahead. That was the calendar.
Backwards, sorry.
Okay. So I thought I had some pictures of the backyard version in here, but it's looking like we're jumping right into grafting. So I'm going to tell you about the other versions of queen rearing that you can do. It must be another slideshow where I've got those. But the pictures aren't really necessary to describe what you can do. If you're wanting some queens for your own use, if you're wanting to make splits, the standard paradigm around here is to make what's called a walkaway split. Who knows who Charlie Moraz was? So up where I live, near Middlebury, there's a big operation that's run by Charlie Moraz's grandson, who's also Charlie, so we call him Chaz to tell him from the old man. And his dad, Bill, was the beekeeper before. And they run about 1,200 colonies, and they raise no queens by the grafting method. All they do is they make walkaway splits every year. And that's how they keep their operation going. And so they've been doing this since the 1920s when the old man started the operation. So it's a completely legitimate method of making splits and keeping things going. What most people fail to understand about walkaway splits is that you've got to have a minimum of 4 frames of brood covered with bees in order for that split to be strong enough to raise a decent queen. You can't make what we think of as a nucleus colony, which is maybe 1 or 2 frames of brood and a food frame. It's small and it's kind of weak. They're not going to raise a good queen. And so what I'm going to suggest, if anybody wants to try making walkaway splits, try it the other way around. And I call it making a reverse split. So who's got more than 1 colony? Good. You should never have just 1 colony. If you only have 1 colony, you should make more colonies before you do anything else. And so in the spring, you've got 1 colony that's still alive, and it's fairly strong. Although what I tell people is you should have 4, and then in the spring, 1 of them's going to be dead, and 1 of them's going to be looking pretty weak, and 1 of them's going to be fine, and 1 of them's going to be really strong. And so you take the really strong one, and you throw a third beep on top of it from the dead one. You take all the clean, nice frames from the dead one and you pile it on top. And now you've got a really strong colony in a few weeks, right? So you let it build up, and then you do the thing that everybody hates to do. You go through that colony and you find a queen. And you take her out and you make a reverse split. You take the queen and you put her in the box that had the dead colony in it, and you put her on the hive stand that had the dead colony on it, and you add a frame or two of brood and a food frame, and you take a couple frames of nurse bees and you shake a couple frames of nurse bees in there, and that's a reverse split. And the ones that we made this year built up and filled the first deep, and then they filled the second deep, and then they filled 3 supers of honey. Now this was an unusual year. They don't always make honey, but they usually always build back up. Now that's an older queen. You can decide to leave her in there and see how she does, or once she's reestablished and there's local queens available in June and July, you can go in, you can pinch her off, and you can replace her, and you've got another colony. It's a full-size colony going into the winter. They really don't have any mite issues because you left all the mites in the other colony, right? Now what happens to the parent colony where you took the queen out? They're going to make a new one. Are they going to make just one? No, bees are kind of like maple trees. When a maple tree tries to reseed itself, does it make one seed? No, it makes thousands, but its goal is to just make one more maple tree. But to do that, it's going to make thousands of seeds. The bees are going to make multiple queen cells. And you're going to have multiple frames with queen cells on them. And if you wanted more hives than what you had, what would you do with those frames of queen cells?
Queen castles.
Yeah, you could do queen castles, you could do 5-frame nuke boxes, you could, since the queen's already raised, now you can make weak nucleus colonies. You can put in 2 frames, 3 frames, 1 brood frame and a food frame, because the queen cell is already raised and is sealed. It doesn't need to be a strong colony anymore. See, your queens were now raised by your strongest colony. You still have that queen from the strongest colony because she's in the reverse split. And if you're lucky, you might have 8 frames with queen cells. So I run 8-frame equipment, so I do the math in base 8. You can do it in base 10 if you wanted to, but the number of frames of brood is usually roughly the same. So let's say you had 8 frames of brood, and you took away 1 box with the old queens, you've got 16 frames left, so you make 8 2-frame splits. One of them is lucky enough to stay behind on the old hive stand and it gets the field force, and the other 7 are somewhere else. Who thinks that's way more hives than what they want? Yeah, so just do 2. Just do 2.
Give the rest of the way. Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
Does
It's a lovely problem to have.
does everyone remember this is what we did this summer at our second open hive? We did the reverse, we went through the 3 deeps, which was a tremendous amount of bees, and found the queen and put her in a nuke, and that's where Nate's nuke that he won came from.
How was that?
All those queen cells.
And so the reason for doing that is because now your queens are being raised by a very strong colony with a large field force, so they're bringing in plenty of nectar and pollen, and with huge numbers of nurse bees, which is what you want for quality queens. And so now your walk-away splits have quality queens in them instead of kind of low-grade queens that weren't fed properly, that weren't really raised by enough nurse bees, that didn't have a field force bringing in pollen and nectar. And so if you really know what you're doing, you can make walk-away splits and have them raise their own queens. But if you're not sure, try it this way. And now you won't get any honey from that colony necessarily this year unless it's a really good year. The reverse split might make honey. But that's okay. You can sacrifice 1 colony to make sure that you're still a beekeeper next year. Because the thing about beekeeping right now is if you're not expanding, you're not going to be a beekeeper anymore.
You're sliding backwards.
That's right. All of us are sliding backwards all the time. And so it's a constant expansion just to stay even. Even the guys, so that I think I can say this out loud, but even the retired state bee inspector, who was bee inspector for 27 years, has had years where he's lost half his colonies, and he's doing everything right. He's doing everything by the book. It's not an excuse to go out and not do everything right, because then you'll lose all your bees. But even the people that really know what they're doing will lose bees. And so that's why we raise queens, that's why we make splits, that's why we do expansion. Does that make sense to everybody? So stop thinking of each hive as a unit. You know, I talk to a lot of beginners, especially, no offense to beginners, but it's like they've named their hives. You know, this is Fred, this is Mary, you know, and they've got a personality. It's like, nope, it's an amorphous thing. In the wild, the bees are constantly splitting themselves, they're moving from place to place, and we have to get used to that and take advantage of that. And so you might have one hive to start, but you shouldn't have one hive at the end of the season. So you should always have extra equipment like that. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Stay on.
So 2 other methods of raising queens that are pretty easy. I actually know which talk the pictures of the cell punch are in, so if you want to, we can go there. That might be more productive, but
Okay.
if you want to see this grafting.
I'm just curious about the cell
Yeah,
punch. I have,
So, if you want to try raising your own queens, but you're nervous about grafting, and for those of you that don't know, grafting is the transferring of a 24-hour-year-old larva into an artificial queen cup. And it can either be plastic or it can be wax. And that artificial queen cup is then transferred into a cell-building colony, which has been set up to be queenless and to be strong and to be ready to raise a large number of queens. And the typical way you do that is to take a quill and slide it under the larva, pick it up in the puddle of royal jelly, and transfer it to the cup. But that freaks some people out because they don't feel their eyesight's good enough, or they don't have the hand-eye coordination or whatever. And to that I say practice. Nobody's good at it the first time. You booger the larva up, they get stuck to the wall of the cell, you drop them on the floor, whatever. Everybody messes it up at the beginning. But if you're still not comfortable with it, 2 ways you can get around it. 3. One of which I don't recommend. You can buy little kits from the catalogs, and you can try and get the queen to lay into a little batch, a little plastic box that has queen cups in it already, and you trap the queen in there under a screen. Don't do that. She doesn't like it, and it doesn't work that good. You spend a lot of time chasing your queen around and trying to get her to lay in plastic. The 2 simpler ways are, you can give her a fresh frame of wax foundation, let them draw it out, the queen will lay eggs in it, and then you just cut it back to create an edge, and they will draw out queen cells on that frame. You just move that frame into a cell builder. Okay? The other way you can do it is to take a piece of 3/8" copper pipe, braze it to a rod with a handle on it, a screwdriver works good, and then sharpen it with a file or a grinder. Yeah, you want to hold that up for everybody?
3/8".
And
We
so,
can have craft day next year.
talk to the plumber. All you have to do then is find a larva that's the right age in the cell, and then you take your sharpened piece of pipe and you just punch it right through the frame. And you end up with a frame with a bunch of holes in it. So then you take a wooden deep frame and you run a bead of melted wax on it, and as you punch out those cells with larvae in them, you stick the backside, the side that didn't have the larva that was the right age into it, you stick it to the cell bar, so that when you put that frame in the colony, those wax cells are facing down, which is the orientation of a natural queen cell. And that's actually an extremely natural way to go about it, because it is actually a cell, it is wax, and it's got a real larva in it, and it was never touched. So you're less likely to booger it up.
We put them right on the plastic cups, so we can move the
You
cups
could
around.
possibly, although I've never seen anybody do that with the punch. You know, for as easy as it is to melt some wax and just stick them right to the
I was
frame.
thinking to move them out like you do, to put them into the nukes.
Yeah, so I've seen different versions. So what Jeff was asking about is then how do you harvest them? Well, the simple way is you take a hive tool and you slide them off, but they don't have a base that's easy to grab onto. So what the old timers used to do is actually pour kind of a puddle of wax on the bar and then stick them to that. And then when you shave that off with your hive tool, you've got this disc of wax that you can hang onto. So the punch is a great way to try it without grafting. The Miller method, which is cutting off a frame, a new started frame of wax foundation. You can also do strips of foundation cut into kind of wedges or triangles. And then there's a guy named Mel Disselcombe who used to write for the bee culture. And he's got a technique which involves, it's kind of like the Miller method of creating an edge, but instead of cutting away the entire frame, you simply take a frame with right age larvae in it, and using your hive tool, you cut away the bottom of the cell wall. So if each larva is in a cell that is horizontal, and this is the cell, simply take your hive tool and you just cut away the bottom so that what you have left is the top, which makes it very easy for the bees then to draw a clean cell off of that. And so if you were doing the reverse split method of raising a bunch of queens, where you have a large, strong queenless hive, personally, just to encourage the bees to raise queens on every frame, I would probably go through and notch the cells in every frame that had right age larvae in it. Otherwise, they might concentrate 30 cells maybe between 2 frames, and then you'd only end up with 2 splits. Does that make sense? Also, a trick for finding queens. Remember those plastic queen excluders we were talking about? We don't tend to look through full-size colonies anymore to look for queens. We go there 4 days ahead and we put queen excluders between all the boxes. And you only have to look through 1 box. How do you do that?
If you only have 2 boxes in it.
So let's say you've got 4 deeps,
Okay.
okay? But you went there 4 days before and you put 3 queen excluders on. And so now you've got a deep, a queen excluder, a deep, a queen excluder, a deep, a queen excluder, and a deep. And you want to find the queen. 4 days later, which box is she in?
Whichever one has fresh fruit.
Whichever one has eggs in it, exactly.
Then you have to look through them and find the eggs.
You have to look through and find the eggs, but
We aren't
it's
looking
darn
for the
lot
queen.
faster than finding the queen.
Yes.
And we carry a little LED flashlight. So even on a cloudy day, you can find the eggs extremely fast. And that's the key. On a cloudy day, you will not find the eggs without a flashlight. Okay? So, does everybody feel like using those methods? They could raise a few queens next year?
Yeah.
So the 3 who were already interested, do those seem like methods that you might try?
Yes. I
The,
like the reverse.
what's that?
I like the reverse.
The reverse split?
Yeah.
That's the one I'd recommend trying first. It's really letting the bees do all the hard work. You're making a cell builder, and you're making it in the easiest way possible. And then you're turning that cell builder into your splits. The only drawback with that method is you can only do it once.
Right.
So what I'm about to show you, and this is really just for Jeff, so if you get bored, just know that it's
It's
to
all
make
about
Jeff
Jeff.
happy.
They aren't listening to me, 'cause
Dale, does that all seem feasible to you?
Yeah. We'll see each box.
Yep.
Have to study up a little.
Yeah, I'll have to brush up on it a little bit, but I think the gist.
Yep, so you should all feel free to email me if you have questions when you're trying this next year. And if you're willing to drive 2.25 hours, we often do a queen rearing class with the Addison County Beekeepers Club. And we're not exclusive, so you're welcome to come. Okay?
Can you speak to the commonly made statement that the swarm, that a supersede, basically it's a,
Which type of cell is best?
right, it's not a supersede, you're asking them to make an
So,
emergency queen.
yep,
And
so.
It's not the same quality.
So it's generally assumed that emergency cells are lower quality cells than swarm cells. And supersedure cells are generally considered to be the lowest quality because generally they don't supersede unless the queen is failing. But there's exceptions to all of those. Sometimes they'll supersede your queen because it's been raining for 2 weeks straight. And who remembers being a teenager in the summer when you were on vacation and you were laying around and it's raining every day? What do you say? Mom! It's always mom's fault. So the bees get mad at mom and they go to supersede her, even though the only real problem is that it's been raining every day for 2 weeks. And And so when there's strange weather patterns, you'll see more supersedure. Now, you'll also see supersedure when you have a queen that's all the queen that's failing, the queen that you introduced that came from Georgia, and they don't like southern queens, whatever. We tried to introduce some Russian queens from the Russian program. They don't like Russians because they invade neighboring countries, so they don't accept the queen. So there's lots of reasons for supersedure. The best artificially reared queens are reared using two impulses. You start the queens using the emergency response because you cannot predict when the bees will initiate a swarm response to raise queens, right? And so that makes it very hard to plan via that calendar that I showed you, right? So what you do is you make a colony queenless, which initiates the emergency response, and then you make it queen right again, but extremely strong. And that then encourages them to tend to the cells like they were swarm cells. So you get the best of both possible worlds. And that's what we're about to get into, which is creating a cell builder, which takes advantage of those two best responses. Okay? All right, and the rest of you